Love this podcast? Support this show through the Acast supporter feature. It's up to you how much you give, and there's no regular commitment. Just click the link in the show description to support now.
You're locked in.
Look at what we have here, folks.
To the only show that matters.
The cream of the crop.
Duke loves wrestling.
And there is no one that does it better than
your host.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass.
The Duke.
And I'm all out of bubblegum.
Folks, as you know, the Duke is on a mission. I am on a mission to elevate the conversation surrounding the business and economics of the pro wrestling industry. Because I got to tell you, I'm pretty frustrated with where it's gone. We've gotten to the point where, you know, a lot of the folks out there who are doing shows and writing stuff, they're insulting our intelligence as it relates to the economics of the business and specifically WWE. I mean, when I look at a situation where so many folks are saying the sky is falling and they're doing so poorly, and Fox is going to cancel SmackDown if they don't deliver a 3.0. I can't reconcile that type of rhetoric when I look at the yearly reports that the WWE, publicly traded companies, putting out, and they've posted numerous years of record profits, and they've set themselves up where, you know, they could legitimately go on an 8-year run of posting record profits. And this is the most money that any wrestling company's ever made in history. So those facts don't match up with the rhetoric. We got to elevate the conversation. So I've taken the time to have folks, you know, the Boston Bad Boy, he works for one of the top media companies in America, and he deals with ad sales. I've had Tony Maglio. You know, he's the TV editor of The Wrap. That's a trade publication that covers the TV and Hollywood industry as a whole. He's come on and he's explained that ratings are not the measuring stick anymore when it comes to what TV networks are going to invest in. Now this week, I'm bringing on a guy who has a show that's dedicated to studying the economics of pro wrestling, and he's done an excellent job, he and his team, digging into the economics of WWE specifically. So without further ado, welcome to the Duke Loves Wrestling podcast. He's the host of WrestleNomics Radio, Mr. Brandon Thurston. How are you, Brandon?
I'm good, Duke. We had to reschedule this because I was sick. I had the plague yesterday, but I'm recovering. I'm doing well. We've got the Crockett Cup on mute here, and I'm sitting on the couch at home, so feeling much better than I was yesterday. So thanks for having me.
I'm just glad you're not one of the Walking Dead. I was a little worried about you there.
Yeah, no, I'm not a zombie. I'm still alive. What's up?
Listen, explain to everybody, please, what WrestleNomics Radio is and why they should be paying attention to it.
So WrestleNomics, the WrestleNomics brand, or WrestleNomics Radio, the podcast, was originally started by Chris Harrington, who some people know as Mookie, or Mookie Ghana on Twitter. And so I started doing that regularly with Mookie I think we started doing that in like April or mid-2017. We started doing that together, and then we did it like every other week, and we ramped it up to like doing it every week, and then we ramped it up to doing it like twice a week, one for free, one on Patreon. And so the beginning of this year, Mookie got officially hired by All Elite Wrestling. So he works for them now, and I'm just left doing it on my own now. And but yeah, we focus on the wrestling business. I also have a website, WrestleNomics.com, which is basically just like a list of links and resources to all sorts of data. Some of it we compiled ourselves. Some of it are just links to other websites on the internet, like real data that you can look at as far as like whatever there's key metrics like TV ratings or attendance, or a lot of WWE corporate financial data that we put together and found over the years. So I've been writing about wrestling business since about 2015, 2014. Especially around the time that the WWE Network launched, I got really interested in in the business side of wrestling and got more into following wrestling again. Like, I've been a wrestling fan all my life. I've been a pro wrestler since 2003. But I was not always following the US scene and WWE very closely. But like around the time the network launched, I've always kind of had like a side interest in new media and in technology. And WWE Network launching in February 2014 was, obviously it's WWE getting into the video streaming service, into the video streaming business. So that was really fascinating to me. And I studied that a lot and read about that a lot and ended up discovering Chris Harrington's work through that and, read a lot of his stuff, learned a lot. I did some blogging and then ended up, I wrote a lot for a site called Voices of Wrestling. I wrote for other websites like Wrestling Inc. and lately I write for Fightful.com. And, I've done a few things for Seeking Alpha, which is like a stock analysis website. So yeah, I studied wrestling business a lot and got really interested in it. And, Chris Harrington and I became closer friends over that time, and we started doing this podcast together. And now I'm carrying the WrestleNomics banner all by myself as he's, I think his official title is the Vice President of Business Strategy for All Elite Wrestling. So yeah.
All Elite Wrestling is very, creative with their business titles there. So that's a pretty impressive title that Harrington has there. Shout out to Chris Harrington. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, you actually have a connection to the wrestling industry. You're not just a guy who writes about it and has a podcast about it. Tell us your connection in wrestling.
So, as a wrestler, I've been wrestling I've been training since 2003. I did some referee stuff in 2003. I really made my debut as a pro wrestler as myself in 2004. So I've been wrestling since then, and just mostly wrestling locally and regionally. And but I've been wrestling more, making longer drives in the last couple of years. You might have seen me in Beyond Wrestling. I think I've wrestled about 3 times there so far this year in the last couple of months. I'm a pro wrestling trainer for a wrestling school called Grapplers Anonymous, which is in Lackawanna, New York, just south of Buffalo, New York, which is where I live. And I work really hard there, and we put out some good wrestlers, I think, and maybe names some people might have heard of, like Daniel Garcia and Kevin Blackwood and Puff and Kevin Bennett, and hopefully a lot of other people that people will learn about soon. But yeah, a lot of people help me with that. There's the Every Night is basically the guy who manages the school and who also trains people there, and Pepper Parks, who is Braxton Sutter on Impact Wrestling, who's just come in there and done some training with us there as well.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not just somebody covering it. You legitimately are out there. You've paid your dues. You've taken your bumps. Still out there doing it, and that's pretty awesome. Let me ask you, Brandon.
Mm-hmm.
Does it make sense to you the cliche song and dance that a company like World Wrestling Entertainment, WWE, they're quote unquote in trouble, and things are really bad, and they're in danger of shows being canceled and what have you because of the current product that they're putting out. Does that make sense to you when you look over their yearly reports and you see the kind of money that they're bringing in and that they're going to continue to bring in for the foreseeable future?
Well, so WWE does a quarterly report, every quarter, and that's always a big day for me. I usually take the day off of work, and the documents drop at 9 a.m. Eastern, and then there's a conference call at 11. So that's always a big day for me, and that's something that we cover. I cover on WrestleNomics in some capacity in audio, and I usually write an article about it. And so WWE has been a company that's been doing really well financially lately. They recorded record revenue. They recorded record profits. Which profit metric you want to look at, they broke all their records in 2018. I think the numbers were $930 million in revenue, and net income $99.6 million, right? This is bigger than any year they've had previously, even if you adjust it for inflation. That's more profit than they had back in the Attitude Era, right? So the company's doing really well financially. The TV deals that they signed, I just reposted the article to the WrestleNomics Twitter account today. So it's about 1 year ago this month. that the news was broken by the Hollywood Reporter that SmackDown was, they were selling SmackDown. SmackDown's being taken off the USA Network and it's going to be put on Fox. So that there's starting in October 2019, WWE is going to be getting these even bigger TV rights deals. So right now, their biggest source of revenue already is TV rights fees related to Raw and SmackDown. But that's going to become even bigger because this current set of deals are expiring, at least in the U.S. The current set of deals are expiring for Raw and SmackDown in October. And they have new deals already signed and in place so that Raw is going to be renewed on the USA Network. And SmackDown, obviously, is going to move from USA Network to Fox. And I think the average annual value for Raw is something like $225 million per year over 5 years. Average annual value of the SmackDown deal is $205 million over 5 years. Okay, that's just their U.S. TV deals. And yeah, that's just revenue, but that's just U.S. TV deals. They also have a big deal. The news just came out today that WWE is moving in the UK from Sky Sports to BT. And they have another big deal, which you should hear news about soon as far as a renewal in India. That's their number 3 or maybe even number 2 market by the time that deal goes up. But so these TV rights deals are not dependent on WWE's performance as far as TV viewership. So WWE kind of, no matter what they do as far as viewership, that doesn't affect the amount of money that these TV networks are paying WWE. We live in a world now where there's a huge premium on live TV stuff, These TV networks, they want programming that's live and that people don't want to watch later on their DVR. They need programming that people are going to sit there and watch and have on while the commercials play. So over this time where, I think a way to describe it is, we live in this media world now where there's ever more things to do with our time. Everyone is in a fight for eyeballs. Everyone is in a fight for our time. There's other video streaming services like Netflix that want our time. There's probably more and more gaming. There's more and more stuff to do on your phone. There's mobile gaming. There's all sorts of competition out there for our time. So to keep the TV bundle together, to keep the TV bundle together of like TV channels that can be sold by cable and satellite, these networks have put an increased amount of value on live programming. So that's why you hear about these huge deals that the NFL, for example, has now. And that's why we hear about this huge deal that WWE has, which was, to put it like in some frame of reference, the value. So the WWE signed a 5-year deal with NBC Universal, which is the parent company of USA Network, and that deal lasted from 2014 and will end in October or September 2019. Okay, and that was $100 million some odd. I don't know the number off the top of my head, but it was a very lucrative deal. So the value of that deal has increased 3.6 times. So the current set of deals that they're going to enter into in October with Fox or SmackDown, with USA Network for Raw, that represents a 3.6x increase in that TV rights revenue. So kind of as you mentioned, WWE is basically guaranteed for the next 5 years, for the length of these US TV deals. And they also mostly coincide with the timing of the UK deal and the India deal. For the next 5 years, through about 2024, WWE is going to break its revenue record probably each consecutive year up to at least 2024. It's going to break probably all its profit records up to 2024. What will happen beyond that point, I don't know. It's really hard to predict what the media ecosystem is going to look like and what that industry, what the TV industry is going to look like and what kind of market there's going to be for Raw and SmackDown at that point. But I can say with, I think, a pretty good degree of certainty that WWE is going to be a very financially healthy company up through 2024, mostly because of enormous TV rights fees they're going to get from TV partners around the world, especially in the United States.
Why do people have, in your opinion, why do people, wrestling fans, why do they have such a difficult time reconciling the fact that something that they're seeing on TV, so the product that WWE is putting out, just because they personally don't like what the WWE is offering today, that doesn't mean that it isn't successful. In fact, it's very successful, like you just outlined just now. Why is that such a hard concept for wrestling fans and the people who cover wrestling to grasp?
Well, I think, and we kind of like mentioned it before we started recording here, I think there's like a feeling of, you know, people watch WWE, they don't feel satisfied with it. And like most of the time that I watch it, to the extent that I do still watch it, I mean, it's a program that I often feel frustrated by when I watch it. It doesn't feel like it's run by somebody who has a great deal of passion for pro wrestling in the way that I have passion for pro wrestling, and the way I think that most wrestling fans have passion for pro wrestling. And for all sorts of reasons that I don't know if you want to get into, but people feel frustrated by it. And I think like what happens then is like people want to, they don't like the show, and then they feel like they want to see some sort of justice for this in the economics. So there must be some sort of punishment for Vince McMahon putting on this kind of product that he puts on. Like there must be some sort of economic punishment that makes him feel like he has to make a change. And one of the metrics that people talk about, and we were kind of getting at just a moment ago, is TV viewership. And TV viewership for Raw and SmackDown in the United States has declined quite a bit. And it's depending on, you know, which segment of time you look at, it has declined beyond the rate of TV overall. For example, we have publishes its own key performance indicator document, and it's on page 1. It's got Raw ratings, SmackDown ratings, overall USA Network ratings, and overall top 25 cable. And you can look at that stuff over time and like put it into spreadsheets, which is something somebody like me does. And you can see that, you know, Raw has declined faster than the rate of the top 25 cable channels overall. So yeah, I think what's been happening in the last year or so, I think it has been more concerning. But just to go back to like the original point we were talking about, though, I think what happens is, you know, people don't like the product, and they feel there has to be like some sort of economic justice for it. But at the same time, like WWE doesn't have, you know, WWE is doing better and better financially. They're going to be doing better and better financially probably for the next 5 years. So it's a really weird and like counterintuitive conundrum that they're in that Vince McMahon's not going to get probably any economic signals anytime soon that tell him, hey, look, what you're doing is wrong. If anything, it's quite the opposite, right? Because he can sit there and say, hey, look, you know, there's some critics out there probably who say things that I don't pay attention to, but look at these new TV deals that I got. USA Network and Fox gave me a 3.6x increase in TV rights. So who are these people to say that I'm doing something wrong? I must be doing something right because they're giving me, you know, over a triple rate on my TV rights. So I think there's that lack of incentive to change for WWE because they are doing and will continue to do better and better financially. But you do see things that I think, especially with this last quarter and with Q3 of 2018, I think you do see some cracks though, like in let's say live event segments. So WWE's business is broken down into 2 major segments when they report it. There's the media division of their business, live events, and consumer products. So media includes everything like TV rights and the W Network and a lot of other things. And then there's live events, which is basically ticket sales and travel packages. And then there's consumer products, which is everything from merchandise sales to like the licensing of action figures and of video games and things like that. So, but in Q3 2018 and in Q1 2019, their live events division basically failed to make a profit. And that's a relatively new phenomenon as far as like, you go back to like the beginning of Vince McMahon being a powerful person in wrestling. The wrestling business was all about, you know, getting on TV for basically no expectation of making any money back on it, only so that you could sell tickets to the live event, which is where you made your money. And now we're at the point where in some quarters, this live events division doesn't even make a profit, but you get all your money from the TV show. So in George Barrios, who is the WWE, one of the co-presidents for WWE, he does a lot of public talks, which you can find on the WWE corporate website. He said, you know, something to the effect of like this business has been, sort of turned on its head. It's been a reversal as far as, the way that you make money here. It's not just about getting on TV to sell tickets. It's sort of like, we're, I don't know what purpose exactly the live event has, but, people like me argue that they should be running fewer and fewer live events, that they should be running fewer house shows because it's just, I see it as more something that puts wear and tear on the talent. There's value in it. There's hidden value beyond the ticket sales, I think, in a live event in terms of like, it puts WWE in a given town for a day and it promotes it in that way and it gives the fans or imagine the kids that go there, they give them that experience and that memory of being at an event and maybe that enhances their propensity to be a WWE fan in the future. But many live events probably aren't making money. Attendance is declining, over time in the last few years. And, it puts a lot of wear and tear on the talent, and I don't see, especially the house shows, they don't seem to, do that well over time. And, when you've got Vince McMahon going on the conference call, as he did, in Q1, which was in May, and he said that, the reason for a lot of these metrics being down, including television viewership and live event attendance, was because of talent absences. He said talent absences. And, he basically said that, things are, we got people who are recovering from injuries and things are going to be better going forward. And, I'm really skeptical of that. I don't really believe that things are going to be that much better going forward as far as television ratings, as far as live event attendance. I think this company, WWE, has, while they are insulated and protected by enormous TV rights fees, they have failed to create, meaningful stars over the last several years. And I think stars are the thing historically and still today that drive the business. I think WWE over the last several years has become an increasingly uncool brand. That's not a technical, finance term, uncool. But I think WWE has become, in a meaningful way, a more uncool brand. And I think AEW, while its name ID is way lower and they're not even on, a major cable channel yet. They will be in October. They'll be on TNT, and maybe they'll gain some great notoriety then. But I think AEW does represent something that is more like what is cool in pop culture. What is a cool wrestling brand like? It's more like that. And WWE is a company and a brand that I think has inspired a lot of distrust with its customers, its fans, and has inspired a lot of distrust now we're seeing increasingly with its talent, where it's, talent is becoming, a lot of people listening have probably listened to the Dean Ambrose interviews, either with Chris Jericho or with Wade Keller, that were released over the last month or so, where he describes, all the problems he saw with WWE's created. And you see a lot of, since AEW started to, become a more powerful thing in wrestling, you see just a lot of just on social media, talent becoming more willing to express their unhappiness with their situation. So yeah, I think that's a really hard thing for a lot of financial analysts to digest or to even be aware of, that there is this sort of distrust with the fans and increasingly so with the talent. And I think that is a problem that I think if I were an investor in WWE, which I have never owned WWE stock, full disclosure, but if I were an analyst in WWE stock or an investor in WWE stock, I would be concerned about that. That there's this increasing, dissatisfaction that there doesn't seem to be. So in my view, there isn't any way this is going to get corrected as long as Vince McMahon is at the helm. Vince McMahon, in John Moxley's words, is going to die in the chair. This is his life. This is his passion, is to run this company and to be the head of creative. And I don't see any plausible scenario in which a healthy Vince McMahon steps out of that position. So I don't see any reason to expect that there will be any systemic change, which is the only thing that's going to get WWE on a healthier financial course. And again, when I say healthier financial course, they're already very profitable, but they could be making more money. They could be a cooler brand. They could be selling more tickets at a live event. They could be having more WWE Network subscribers. They could be doing a lot better in television viewership. Yeah, but the story is very complicated, and I hope that's a decent description of it.
We're talking to Brendan Thurston of WrestleNomics Radio. You said a mouthful there. you definitely said a mouthful there. Let me clear my throat while I jump into this, because
while I cough, yeah.
Clearly, I don't agree with everything you just said. which is not a surprise. I've been accused of being a disagreeable kind of guy. I have a hard time, once again, reconciling that level of, and you were expressing your opinion, and it's an educated opinion based on how you've studied and what you've studied as it relates to WWE as a business. So, you're not wrong, but you're certainly not right, in my opinion, either.
You warned me that you'd be disagreeing with me.
Yeah, I definitely gave you the disclaimer.
I'm ready.
If WWE is making record profits, more money than anyone ever in wrestling has made, any company, as an investor, there is no way on God's green earth that I'm ever going to tell them to do anything other than whatever the hell they've been doing. And I'm going to take that a step further. I think there is a section of the wrestling community, especially wrestlers and promoters and mostly the old timers, who don't understand that what it means to draw in pro wrestling in 2019 is not what it meant in 1980 or 1990 or even in 2013. What it means to draw in pro wrestling legitimately are these TV and internet deals, these streaming deals and what have you. So the focus is to grab those monies. You could paper all of your TV product, and if you have a strong enough set of TV deals like WWE has, it doesn't matter. So the concept of a ticket sales being down and that being an issue, I just don't. That doesn't jive with me. I don't think that's an issue at all. When you look at all live sports, for the most part, ticket sales are down because it's a hell of a lot easier and cheaper to drink your own beer and eat your own snacks at home. And you don't have to worry about parking. You don't have to worry about, getting home afterwards and what have you. It's just it's a more comfortable experience at home. And when you're delivering a product that's, entertaining enough to watch, and clearly it is, because the advertisers are spending the money on it, which is why the networks are offering up billion-dollar contracts. So clearly this is entertaining enough that somebody's interacting with it, and enough somebodies for them to take that kind of gamble. The live event ticket sales really don't matter. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't try to grab those dollars, because every dollar is a good dollar in that regard. But there's no sky falling just because ticket sales are down when you're signing billion-dollar TV deals. It's the complete opposite. The WWE Network subscriptions are up. It's higher than what they expected.
Well, the network subscriptions for WrestleMania this past year were down. I've got the KPIs open. They were down 6% for WrestleMania 2019 versus WrestleMania 2018, which I thought was. I've always thought of the W Network subscriber metric, the number, as like, okay, it has been growing since the launch, of course, right? It's a new business. It's this new technology. So you can't really think of it as a popularity metric. It's going up and up, or at least, year over year, it goes up. But this WrestleMania, it finally didn't. It went down by 6%. And so now I think from this moment or going forward, the W Network subscriber number becomes something that I think is more suggestive, right? It's indicative of popularity. And I think it tells you that WrestleMania this year was somehow not as interesting or, not as attractive as at least the WrestleMania of last year, which is a year in which all that technology was younger and maybe there was less of a propensity for people to accept having to set up the streaming device or go through the friction of, setting up a user account. So I think there's that when it comes to the W Network subscriber number. And that is another, I don't want to sound too dramatic because like we keep saying, this company is going to be profitable and is going to be more and more profitable, at least over the next 5 years. But there is something, alarming here about, what's going on here. And is the company, like, on the whole, becoming less popular? Like, as far as, are there fewer fans and is there less, total, interest in WWE? So there's that.
But see, I can't take what you're saying there and, give my stamp of credibility to it, because when you look at their social media interactions, they put up a video of R-Truth with the 24/7 title, and I mean, the YouTube streams and the Facebook streams are through the roof on something like that. People are interacting with brands in a way in 2019 that, unfortunately, the industry has not come up with a uniform way to completely understand.
Well, so I want to talk about YouTube views. YouTube views in Q1 2019 actually declined for the first time in a couple of years. Global hours viewed were in Q1 2019 was at 300 million and had been at 351 million in Q4. In Q4,
how much of that has to do with Facebook and what they're offering from a streaming standpoint, WWE's relationship with them? There's got to be a direct correlation between how many people are actually watching directly on Facebook and how much of that is being pulled from YouTube.
Okay, so the number that I just referenced there, this is directly from WWE's corporate website, and it's not just YouTube. This is the name of this metric is AVOD, which means ad supported video on demand, global hours viewed. And in the fine print, it says AVOD is ad-supported video on-demand consumption includes videos viewed on third-party Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat. So all of those platforms are combined. That's not just YouTube.
And you're saying that they're down. Well, that's telling you that they're down.
It's down. Page 2 of the KPIs, yeah. That's global hours viewed, and they have another metric right beside it on the same PDF page, AVOD global views, which is in the billions. 7.7 billion in Q1 2019, down from 8.5 billion in Q4 2018. And again, usually W is kind of a seasonal business. You usually see the best quarter for W business is Q1, that period of January through March where you've got Royal Rumble and the run up to WrestleMania. And Q4 usually, at least when it comes to TV viewership, usually a little bit less, right? Because that's the period that's overlapped with NFL football games. So, if anything, I would expect Q1 to be doing even better. And for anybody who wants to look at this is called the key performance indicators. If you go to WWE's corporate website and you click on investors, you'll find the key performance indicators. I'm just talking about something that's on page 2, and it's basically a bar graph that goes up and up and up. We're looking at 2017 through the present, and it goes up and up and up and up and up, except for in the most recent quarter, Q1 2019, where it goes down.
I really don't appreciate you coming on my show and basically proving me wrong. I'm going to have to go back and take a look at that just to verify, but I don't like the way this conversation is going.
You'll have to edit this part out.
Yeah, I may have to do that, but of course that means I'm going to have to figure out how to edit because my producer is not available today. So that's interesting. So what you're saying is they're reporting, WWE itself is reporting that their streaming numbers on third-party platforms, including Facebook and YouTube and what have you, they're down.
Yeah. Yep.
Huh.
Yep.
That's a problem.
So, and like in that neighborhood of metrics, let's see, social media followers. Social media, I think it's a different kind of animal because people don't really unfollow as much as they do follow.
Oh, don't pull that. Don't pull that, please. Don't try to gloss over the follows by claiming people don't unfollow. So that's your way of trying to cover up the fact that WWE followers are through the roof.
And the followers that they're counting are not unique followers, right? Like if you follow WWE and you follow John Cena, you're counted as 2 followers. I think the better way to think about it, I think the better name for it would be like social media touch points, but so they have over 1 billion total followers across Facebook, Twitter, and other platforms, including Instagram. And I have like a comparison of their growth on Facebook and their growth on Twitter versus like the monthly active users on Twitter itself. So what Facebook grew, let's see, Facebook grew 1%, while the monthly active user rate on Facebook grew 2%. So yeah, I mean Facebook's slowing down quite a bit.
Come on, man. You mean to tell me a growth that's a positive, that's an increase, mind you, and you're trying to put a negative spin on that?
because social media is a younger form of media. So social media, Facebook and Twitter, social media platforms, I think you have to consider, like, in the same way you can kind of excuse TV viewership being down, because that's an older form of media. I think you have to, like, offset some of the increase on newer forms of media, like social media and YouTube. You have to temper that when you read that stuff,
But they have an increase, so that's a good thing.
They have an increase. It's definitely not a bad thing. Yeah, you should. I think, like, what should your expectations be? What is a zero sum? What would your expectations be based on the past? It's slowing down, but then again, the world is slowing down. The monthly active user rate for Facebook and for Twitter is slowing down. But so is WWE.
Yeah, but if that is in line, at the end of the day, if you're not in the red, then you're doing damn well. And there's literally no one else to compare WWE to. That's the other thing that people need to accept. They have no competition in the wrestling industry. You literally would have to combine multiple companies just to even be half of what WWE is. So the notion that they making the most profit and having an increase in social media follows, etc., you can't look at that as a negative. How?
I think what WWE's done on social media has been important, and I think the way that wrestling fans consume the wrestling fandom has become increasingly more so on social media. Like, I think a lot of people, while there are, there's less people watching the program and, like, sitting down with a TV set and watching Raw or SmackDown, the USA Network, I think there's a lot of people consuming or being aware of what's happening on Raw and SmackDown one way or another through the internet, whether that's through WWE social media platforms or other wrestling social media stuff. So I think that's happening, and I think that's something that you could make the argument that that's they're cannibalizing their own business, and they should be doing less stuff on social media, and they shouldn't be putting those Raw and SmackDown clips on YouTube because that could cannibalize their viewership. And I know that seems almost like an intuitive way to think about it, but I think that's not the right way to think about it. And I think it is good that WWE has done as much as they have done on social media and on YouTube and on Facebook, because my belief is that people are going to go to these new forms of media regardless, especially younger people who are going to be the people that you need to have as your fan base in the future. So they're going to go to these newer forms of media regardless. And if you're not on the devices that they use, if you're not in the platforms that they visit, you're going to miss out on their time. You're going to miss out on the opportunity to build this fandom. So there's a story about I think that George Barrios tells about Vince McMahon told them some 10 years ago that he saw social media as a land grab, and he wanted us, WWE, to go and get more than their fair share of social media. So this is something that I think in a credit to WWE that they saw as important many years ago, as early as they should have. Creative stuff and other criticisms aside. So I think they've their existence on social media and their use of the internet and their willingness to disrupt themselves with the W Network has been pretty forward thinking. Even if it wasn't executed like 100% in the best way possible.
Damn right. It's funny because you study the economics. You're a pro wrestler, so you understand that side of the coin as well.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to put your pro wrestler hat on for a second.
Mm-hmm.
A pro wrestler is an entertainer, right?
One could say so, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what does a pro wrestler get paid to do?
And usually, to have matches, cut promos, to in some way help promote future events.
Yes, to entertain the crowd
for starters.
They can generate money from the entertainment that's being offered. So a company pays a pro wrestler to entertain so people come back. That's the main idea, right?
Yeah, I think there's like various ways, and I think there's like multiple legitimate ways to look at wrestling, and I think like an economic perspective, like economic goals is one thing I think wrestlers have and are legitimate in wanting to have like artistic goals as well, that are not necessarily related to economic goals. So that's just an ongoing conversation I have with myself.
Sure, and this is what I'm getting at. I'm glad you see the road that I'm going down here. From my personal perspective, I have a hard time understanding a guy like Dean Ambrose, John Moxley, whatever he wants to call himself today. Here you have a guy who's being paid to portray a character in the manner that the company that's paying him prefers. And that can change depending on the needs of the company. So right now, and you know, throughout the duration of his time on the main roster, the company was presenting a product that was geared towards the next generation of wrestling fans, younger fans, PG product. So they needed that character to deliver something that was within the parameters of a PG product. Now, as an artist, he had a problem with that, which he's expressed on, you know, the interviews that you talked about, especially during the Wade Keller interview, where he went even a step further than the Chris Jericho one, discussing this creative frustration that he had and what have you. At what point does the wrestler, the entertainer, at what point do they accept the fact that you signed the contract, you made this deal, that you're going to deliver your art in the manner that the company requests, and they're paying you for that. And if they're paying you on time to deliver the art a certain way, as long as it's not sexist and you know, homophobic or racist or something crazy, as long as it's not hitting it on those levels there. At what point does the entertainer cut the crap and accept the fact that this is what you signed up for? You signed up to, you're getting paid to do it the way they tell you to do it. Cut the crap and accept that. At what point do we get there?
Do we get to where? Were they, I mean, like, WWE wrestlers are under contract, and WWE exudes a certain amount of control over what they're supposed to do. They book them for whatever dates. They as we know, they have scripts, and you're supposed to do X, Y, and Z and say very specific lines, and you're supposed to have matches that may be very heavily controlled, and then there's going to be a very specific winner and loser. It sounds like we're starting to describe the employee independent contractor issue, but that's a different issue. But I don't know. Wrestlers are contracted, and they're told to do certain things, and as long as they're not morally reprehensible, I guess, yeah, sure, wrestlers should do within you know, with certain exceptions, do what they are told by their you know, other promoters to do. But then again, when my contract is up, if I don't want to work for the promoter anymore, I may choose not to. Whether that's because I feel creatively dissatisfied, or I just want to work with those people over there instead of these people over here. Does that answer the question?
Well, and I'm glad you said it the way that you said it, because at the end of the day, I think that for some reason today's wrestler, and especially, and I'm talking about people who either were in the WWE or currently with some of the things that they post and say, they forget that for the most part, you're not being paid for your creative ideas. That's somebody else's job. It's somebody else's job to come up with the storylines, and they're paying people damn good money to come up with the direction that they want their product to go in. And you know something? If you look at the bottom line of the amount of money that they're making, clearly they're doing something right. So, wrestler A, it really isn't your job to dictate to the company what your character is going to do. And, you know, they can entertain your idea, and if they don't accept your idea, that's the way it is. Pull the red wagon to the ring, say the stupid line, and go home and collect your check.
Yeah. I guess I would say that I don't accept that the universe we live in is the best possible universe. I don't accept that a WWE, which by every description that I hear of it, I've never worked for WWE or anything nearly in that capacity, but like everything I hear about it, they have like 20 some odd writers. I don't accept that the system that exists is the best possible system. And I don't accept that like there needs to be 20 some odd writers. I don't know if I even accept that there needs to be like more than one or two or a very small team of bookers. I think that it may be in WWE's economic interest as well as in whatever creative or artistic interest there is for the audience and for the performers themselves. I think it may even be beyond that in WWE's and in a wrestling company's economic interest to allow talented performers to have a certain amount of input on what they do. Obviously, and you mentioned the TVPG thing. I don't think that okay, maybe Dean Ambrose wanted to bleed at certain moments, and I think it makes sense to prioritize the value of certain sponsors ahead of allowing him to bleed in a couple matches. So I think there are limits that you have to put on what these performers want to do at times. But I think there's value in allowing wrestlers who have passion, have a lot of creativity, to have a certain amount of input over wrestling, and I think the system that WWE has built for itself is one that limits it, and WWE's financial success is not necessarily because of its system, but it's despite its creative system.
Well, and I guess you and I are going to have to agree to disagree on that, because I feel, again, as an investor, I don't want you changing too many things. Well, again, we can go down the moral road. We can talk about you changing your pay structure to pay women equally, and we could talk about the getting rid of the union busting. We could even talk about something that you've covered extensively. You've written about it, and you've covered it on the show in relation to WWE being able to afford to have the wrestlers turn them into actual WWE employees.
Mm-hmm.
From an economic standpoint, your premise is that they should be able to afford that, and I agree with you. I think you've made some excellent points in relation to that. And folks, if you head over to the Duke Loves Wrestling Facebook and Twitter pages, underneath the post for this podcast episode, I'm actually going to post a link to what our man here, Brandon Thurston, has written about WWE being able to afford to pay their wrestlers. I think everybody should take a look at that. I think it makes sense. But outside of that, I just don't believe that I'm going to give Brandon Thurston, the wrestler, creative freedom to just do whatever the hell he wants out there, because he doesn't feel that the writers who I'm employing understand his character the way he does. Just do it.
Yeah, and I'm not saying a wrestler should be allowed to do whatever they want, but that wrestlers should, let's see, for example, within certain parameters and within certain guidelines, have the ability to do their own promos, and I think it's not in WWE's economic interest to script them instead. And I think there could be more freedom around what kind of matches they have as well, and maybe even in some ways how they promote their characters, whether that's on social media and other WWE video platforms or even non-video written, the website or whatever. It's not. I'm not saying like they should just be able to do and say whatever they want whenever they want. There's other priorities that wrestlers may overlook and may not recognize the value in, and that may harm WWE. For example, if they wanted to bleed all over the place, and then Mattel wakes up in the morning and says, "What is going on here?" There are limits that have to be put on wrestlers for the best interest of the company. But I think the world that we live in here, where WWE has a lot of control over the creative process, and it's not just like the creative process. Like, I think that the biggest problem in WWE is just this lack of ability to create stars, and the way that I listened to Bruce Mitchell say something that I thought was useful the other day, where he said, in pro wrestling, the benefit of pro wrestling as opposed to other sports is that you get to pick the winners. What we don't get to pick are who the stars are. And Roman Reigns has been pushed a lot, and he's been chosen as the star. And Roman Reigns probably should be a big star, but I think a lot of time and resources were put towards him at the expense of building any other star. And I think that's just one symptom that's part of a larger disease, and I don't want to make it sound like that. It's Roman Reigns, that's the problem, or the way that the company has tried to get Roman Reigns over the last 4 or 5 years is the main problem. It's one of the problems among all the others, which is I think the main decision maker, Vince McMahon, has a very dysfunctional and stubborn way of doing wrestling business and a way of doing wrestling TV in a way that frustrates his viewers and frustrates eventually his workers, his wrestlers. And I think we're seeing the problems that causes start to manifest now in terms of viewership and in terms of network subscriptions, live attendance, and even AVOD, time spent with video streaming that's free, which we just talked about a minute ago.
Well, once again, I completely disagree with you, but I respect your position on the topic. There's no two ways about that. What can we expect from WrestleNomics Radio and the upcoming episodes here? What are some of the things that you're working on that we should be sinking our teeth into?
So I just did a long episode on, which I kind of think it was like an audio documentary on the Saudi Arabia story. And I think that is to go on another quick tangent. I think the Saudi Arabia thing, the bad press around it, I don't think every WWE fan is aware of that story and why that is a problem. But I think there are some fans who are turned off by that. So I think that's another thing on the pile. Just like the lack of concern about, we don't need to get into the whole story, but of taking money from a government like Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Yeah, so I did about a 50-minute audio documentary on WWE's relationship with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, which is a 10-year deal that they have, which is worth, tens of millions of dollars per event. So I may do another episode that's sort of similar in terms of being kind of like an audio documentary looking at what's been happening with WWE popularity over the last 5 years or so. I've got some notes and I'm starting to put together some audio clips for that. But definitely every quarter I do a WWE earnings report podcast. Most recently we did one with Chris Harrington, and we talked about all the things that we learned when we read the WWE quarterly reports, and we listen to Vince McMahon and George Barros and Michelle Wilson talk about WWE business every quarter. So yeah, we used to do it weekly, but I kind of just have been doing it whenever I feel like I have a story to tell. I did one that you mentioned about the independent contractor employee issue. And, whenever there's a story that I think is, it's worth taking, half an hour, 50 minutes to listen to, we put it out there at WrestleNomics Radio, which you can find, just on any podcast platform.
Well, I'll say this. I definitely listened to your Saudi Arabia episode of WrestleNomics Radio, and it was just brilliant. I mean, it was laid out in an excellent manner. You had different sound clips. This is a thing that I don't agree with everything that you say. Let me just put that out there, Brandon Thurston. You and I don't completely agree, which is not unusual. I don't completely agree with my own mother. I love her even though she can beat me up. But one of the things that I respect about you to the hills is the fact that you cite where you get your information from. You quote that information completely. You're explaining to everybody, I arrived at the conclusion that I've arrived at because of X, Y, and Z. So it's very easy to understand your thought process. It's very easy to understand the road you went down and how you got to where you are. I respect that. Because I think that there are too many people in wrestling who are reporting on and discussing wrestling. They act as if they have all the answers, and quite frankly, they don't. And they're not putting out enough citation So someone like myself who's very, analytical and wants to know how the sausage gets made, I want to be able to go back and take a look at how you arrived at your conclusions. So I respect you for doing that much. And just to get back to that Saudi Arabia episode, it was, even though I felt it was a little short, you could have gone on even longer, man, because you were just
You wanted to be longer. Okay.
It was awesome. It was awesome.
Thank you.
And I got a political background, so I'm very well aware of what's going on in Saudi Arabia and their history and the history between the United States and Saudi Arabia. You know, how we've been in business with them since the 30s as a nation. So for you to cover a lot of that stuff and talk about WWE and what have you, it was just brilliant. It was brilliant. I do want to ask you this question, though. And folks, I want you to please, WrestleNomics Radio, go to your favorite podcast app, go listen to the latest episode that's posted, which is the Saudi Arabia episode, if I'm not mistaken. So you can understand what we're talking about. And I'll post that link, too, because I want everybody to go check that out. I do want to ask you this, though. How do you reconcile your opinion on the matter? Which, correct me if I'm wrong, you don't believe WWE should be going after Saudi money right now. Is that correct?
So the podcast I try to make very just factual, and I don't really assert any opinion on it. And I think some of the people who listened to it and had nice things to say about it, pointed that out. And I think that's an important thing. Like, I will answer your question, but I think there's there's a lot of wrestling media where the opinion and the news just sort of mix together in the same batch. And I think it is appropriate at times to just have, here's the news, and then maybe in some separate area that is marked as my opinion. I would say what my opinion is. So what is my opinion on the Saudi Arabia deal? Yeah, I don't think it kind of what's laid out there, hopefully factually, in that podcast is like, look, this is not the same as, W does dozens of events every year in all different countries throughout the world. W does events sometimes in China. W does events in countries all over the world. But this one is quite a bit different because of the amount of money involved and because the deal is not with like a venue in a country. The deal is with the government itself, and they're paying them tens of millions of dollars. To put it in context, it looks like to me, by my own estimate, the value of the Greatest Royal Rumble, which was a year ago, looks to be in the neighborhood of $50 million. $50 million. So that's like 3 times the biggest WrestleMania in terms of ticket sales. The value of the tickets. So WrestleMania 32, $17.3 million. That's the all-time live event gate record for pro wrestling. You multiply that by 3, that's still short of the Greatest Royal Rumble's, the fee that they got from the government for the Greatest Royal Rumble. So that's a ton of money. You gotta think about, why are they giving WWE that much money? It's so that people will watch the Greatest Royal Rumble or Crown Jewel or Super Showdown, and they'll see, this event from Saudi Arabia, and hey, look, Saudi Arabia doesn't seem that bad. There's people there who seem like decent people, and they're just watching a wrestling event just like I watch a wrestling event. So maybe what's happening in that country isn't all that different from the life in my own country, where things are relatively, decent as far as, the way that people live, even though, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is involved in a number of human rights violations, including it appears that they were responsible for the murder of the journalist Jamal Khashoggi. You can be penalized by death for being a gay person in Saudi Arabia. Women have to have permission from a guardian to do things like open a bank account. They just only recently got the right to drive, and meanwhile the activists who protested so that women could have the right to drive are being jailed, just for starters. And they're involved in this conflict in Yemen, where Iran is backing one side and Saudi Arabia is backing another side, and there's stories about a Saudi-led coalition making airstrikes on school buses and on funeral processions and on weddings, killing civilians. So, in short, I think it all is about, this thing called Vision 2030. It's a program that the Saudi government has put together to try to enhance its image around the world. And, Saudi Arabia should probably be, one of these countries that we think of as being one of the worst countries in the world to its people. And, I don't think there's any amount of money that justifies aiding them in that
here's my issue with that, and I don't disagree with a word you just said.
Yeah.
I don't disagree with any of it. Where I'm at a fork in the road with all of the rhetoric around this topic. The United States, once again, the United States has been in business with Saudi Arabia since the 1930s. And the people responsible for the business that we have with Saudi Arabia are people who work for us. They are our elected officials. We have a say in whether or not that person has that job where they can negotiate deals and sell arms and God knows what, and do business with Saudi Arabia. Well, that's not interrupted. That continues. This very second that's happening. So my point is...
And that's not right either, I would argue.
Okay, well, here's my point.
Yeah.
We have control over what's happening with our nation through our elected officials. If we are not putting enough pressure on our elected officials, and I'm talking about the folks up in Washington, if we're not putting enough pressure on them to discontinue business relations with Saudi Arabia, relations that we as a nation are benefiting from, by the way, if we're not putting the pressure on them to do that, then how the hell am I going to tell WWE to stop? WWE doesn't owe me anything. WWE doesn't work for me. They have a product. I can choose to patronize their product or I can choose not to. And that's the end of that agreement. The elected officials work for us. So, to everybody listening, if you've never called your Congress people and told them that you're completely against us working for Saudi Arabia and that they're going to lose your vote in the upcoming election if they don't advocate for the discontinuance of that relationship, if you've never done that, then do me a favor. Kindly shut your face. Don't you point a finger or say a word to WWE if you've never picked up the phone or sent an email or done anything to advocate for the discontinuance of our relations with Saudi Arabia. It's contradictory. It doesn't make sense. So that's my opinion on it.
Yeah, I guess like on the order of moral responsibility, the U.S. has multi-billion-dollar arms deals with the government, and that is more morally terrifying than a multi-million-dollar wrestling deal with the government. But both are wrong.
Sure, and I don't disagree with you one bit. But if you're not going to put the pressure on the people who work for you, who you actually have real influence over, leave the business alone. What are you doing messing with the business for? Leave them alone. That's my opinion, and I don't think you agree with that opinion, which is okay. But
I think you can be. I think two things can be wrong, and one thing can be worse than the other, and it doesn't. Another thing being worse, one thing being worse than another thing doesn't lessen the badness of the thing that is less bad. You know what I mean?
Sure. Agreed. And I think at the end of the day, it comes down to respect. And Brendan Thurston, I have the utmost respect for you. Again, I really enjoy what you're doing. I think you're doing a service to the wrestling community as a whole, both for the fact that you're a pro wrestling trainer. So you're not just out there wrestling, which you're entertaining the fans, what have you, but you actually are training the next generation, teaching people how to be safe and do it the right way. So that's a major service, and I always tip my hat to the trainers. We've had many of them on the show. But also, this WrestleNomics radio and stuff that you also write. Like you said, you've written for Wrestling Inc. Shout out to my man Raj Giri. You've written for Fightful. You've written for this one. You've written for that one. You know, you've written for major publications. You've written everything. You've written for your own stuff. Everybody. You're really a solid dude to the community, and I want the whole wrestling world to know your name and know who you are and continue to check in on what you're doing, because if we had more people approaching these topics the way that you approach it, I think that we would have a more intelligent and therefore more powerful wrestling community. what I mean by that is we could actually use our influence to say to WWE, you know what, we're not gonna deal with you anymore because you keep union busting. Make these folk employees, accept the fact that they're going to be a union, pay the women equal pay to the men, and let's get on with it from there. As opposed to, I can't stand the fact that Dean Ambrose had to pull a red wagon to the ring and say a cartoon line. Oh my God. You know, it's just, there's a lack of intelligence with that type of stuff when there are actually real issues going on.
Yeah. I think like some of our responsibilities around wrestling, and we were talking earlier about like why I study like the economics of wrestling, and I guess I want to make wrestling better, and the way to understand how to do that is to understand what motivates the business, and that is economics, that is money, often, and but there are social and moral responsibilities I think we have above the economics.
Damn right. Listen, if folks listening, if they want to not only see your work, but also just get in touch with you, go ahead. Plug your Twitter, plug all your social media, plug your podcast. I'm going to give you the floor here.
Sure, you can follow me on Twitter at Brandon Thurston, Brandon. I'm on Instagram. There's more like pro wrestler stuff on my Instagram, Farmer_Thurston. Wrestlenomics.com is a website that I mentioned earlier that's meant to be sort of like almost like a library or like a resource area for all sorts of metrics. Some of the things that we referenced here, talking about the YouTube views and AVOD hours viewed and live attendance and viewership. There's all sorts of links there to spreadsheets that I've put together or that Chris Harrington and I have worked together to put together. So like you mentioned, like in a lot of my writing, I try to make things accessible and try to explain where everything comes from. I'm not somebody who has like all these like inside secret sources. Most of the things that I learn and that I write about or talk about are just things that are available in one form or another publicly, and that anybody should be able to find. And if you go to Wrestlenomics.com, you'll find a lot of those resources there. Wrestlenomics Radio can be listened to for free on just about any podcast platform. And you can follow Wrestlenomics itself on Twitter at Wrestlenomics. And I'm a pro wrestler. I'm going to be wrestling next June 29th in North Carolina, New York for Empire State Wrestling. You can go to ESWWrestling.com and check that out. There's tickets available there for a big match between Daniel Garcia and myself for the ESW Heavyweight title. Student versus teacher. So that should be fun.
And let me just say, Daniel Garcia, let's be honest here, you're going to be taught a major lesson. You know what's going to happen. So,
yeah.
Put that out there. He's been running his mouth a lot. I have noticed that, and that's unfortunate.
You aware of him? Are you aware of him?
I'm a wrestling fan, brother. I'm aware.
Cool. Okay. Cool. He's four guys who we trained: Daniel Garcia, Kevin Black, and Kevin Bennett. And Puff were in a major auto accident in January, and Garcia and Blackwood were hurt pretty badly as far as like they had like both their legs broken and were banged up in a lot of other ways. Bennett and Puff came away pretty unscathed, luckily. But yeah, this is Blackwood and Garcia are finally getting to the point where they're making their comebacks now. This will be the match I have with him in a couple Saturdays. Will be his first match back locally here. It'll be just his second match back, and it was a match that was supposed to happen in January, and I think it's a match that a lot of people were excited for and anticipated, and we weren't able to give them in January, but now it's going to happen finally in June. And I've been wrestling for a long time, but like as I get older here and I get better here, I think these matches, my stuff becomes more and more heavy and more important, and I'm still getting better. He's like 20 years old, and he's very good already. He's scary good already for being as young as he is, and it's going to be a big, heavy match. I think it's going to be one of the most important matches of my life. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Well, he's a young punk, and I know that you're going to teach him a good lesson. But I will say that, and I don't know if you realize this or not, but you helped make a name for these guys just because of how passionate you were about the car accident and some of the stuff that you put out there about helping these guys out with the medical bills and what have you. That was mentioned all over the place. Jim Cornette, Jim Ross. It was reported on by different wrestling publications, what have you, and you were sourced as a person. You know, the stuff that you put out there was what everybody was talking about in relation to what happened. So
it's amazing how many people retweeted it or whatever it was. But yeah, there was a big GoFundMe that raised, I forget what number they topped out at, but like tens of thousands of dollars towards covering their medical bills. That was
behind that, you know.
Yeah, that was put together by Andy Williams, who's also a wrestler from the Buffalo area. He's also in this band a lot of people know called Every Time I Die. I think his girlfriend actually set that up. But yeah, just a lot of support, a lot of really, really nice people coming together. A lot of people just from all over the wrestling world, you know, shared that or even donated money. It's really nice.
Well, and here's my point in saying that. So when you are a little surprised, and you say, you know about Daniel Garcia? Well, yeah, you made sure of that.
Yeah, I'm in this forest here. It's hard for me to tell like who knows about this stuff outside my area, you know.
Well, and I guess we can end it on this because I don't want to take up too much of your time. I mean, even though you beat me up enough here, this is an example of how strong a modern wrestling company and wrestling personalities, how strong their reach is. Because if you can put out a tweet about some guys that you trained and the unfortunate accident they had, and, you know, other people within the circle putting out the tweets and getting the message out there, and it reached literally everybody. I mean, it was legitimately mentioned in all the wrestling publications. Some of the top personalities in the history of the business were talking about it and retweeting and all that good stuff. If your message can get that far, how the hell can we not understand how WWE is where it is right now?
Well, I think a lot of people were sharing that besides, you know. It's not just because it's me. There's a lot of people with big followings who shared that thing out, you know, including Trevor Parks and stuff like that. But yeah, I think people should know a lot more about the wrestling industry and should study it a lot closer, and the industry would be better off, you know. Like one of the things I've done in the school is to try to help people understand, help the students and wrestlers there understand, like, it's more and more the case that the path to WWE or the path to whatever promotion it is that you want to make it in, or just the path to becoming a full-time wrestler, is through the indies and is through this economic ladder, I call it, of pro wrestling, where it starts out sort of at the local level, then the regional level, and these super indies. So I think even that stuff, even studying the business and doing this WrestleNomics stuff, has helped informed me on like how to advise people or how to like guide people. I think like it's one thing to train people how to wrestle and how to take bumps and how to have a match, and I think it's another thing in addition to that to help people develop as wrestlers and all the things that means. You know, how to get your name out there and how to, you know, what's the best strategy to go about in terms of how to develop myself as a wrestler. It's not just about having matches and knowing how to work, which it is about that too, but it's about understanding how does this industry work and how can I make it work for me.
Wow, what a conversation there. We didn't agree on everything. But I will say this Brandon Thurston guy, he is somebody who really gets it. And again, it's intelligent conversation about the business, the economics of pro wrestling. So I hope you enjoyed this special episode here, folks. Didn't want to waste any time. I just jumped right into the discussion because there was so much to talk about. The discussion was so detailed. Just, good stuff. Good stuff. Listen, I know that WWE Stomping Grounds is happening this weekend. I'm sure some of you are waiting for my picks and what have you. And you can head over to the Duke Loves Rasslin Facebook and Twitter pages to see that. You know, the only real prediction I'll give you is that the best in the world, Shane McMahon, is going to beat the heck out of that punk Roman Reigns. That's the only prediction that's worthy of being delivered here. So I'll just leave it at that. But, you know, join us next week where I'll go into a little bit more detail about some of the things going on in pro wrestling. I just wanted to give you some of the best conversation about the economics of pro wrestling. And the guy who runs the WrestleNomics radio podcast, Mr. Brandon Howard Thurston, he was the guy to talk to about it. So I'm going to let that linger, let that sit. It was a long conversation. Definitely worth it. And, just check in. Check in on Duke Loves Rasslin for more information about what's going on in pro wrestling. And we'll definitely be back next week with even more excellent interviews, even more excellent analysis on what's going on. We're not going to play games. Shout out to my man Peter Vesey, the Hall of Fame basketball journalist and writer. We did a special on the NBA where he talked about what really happened with Kawhi Leonard and the San Antonio Spurs. That's also up on the YouTube channel. It's up there. iTunes, you name it. I know you folks who subscribe, you probably were surprised to see that in your subscription box this past week. Hey, I'm throwing out bonuses, man. We'll talk about a little bit of everything. No big deal. Hey, if I'm inspired on Sunday, I might throw out a bonus episode about the pay-per-view. You never know. So stay tuned. But for now, this is the Duke signing off, saying, be kind to yourselves, be kind to others. Bye-bye, everybody.
This is Tony Schiavone, and we're desperately out of time on Duke Loves Wrestling.